Times.
I'm getting political updates about the election side.
I
Turn my phone off so they don't.
Yeah, I know. It keeps buzzing because
Yeah.
AP and.
Yeah, Mitch
Oh,
McConnell's.
can we have our own phone to like kind of see what?
Yep, absolutely.
Is Mitch McConnell losing?
Who won?
Yeah.
Shelley Moore.
No, Mitch McConnell
Torpedo.
was the first one they recorded. They're like, the AP has recorded Mitch McConnell. I don't think the polls are even close there.
This is 2012, and West Virginia just got their first female senator. Or 2014. 2014.
Yeah, but West
What year is
Virginia is
it?
also still in 1930, so
I don't know where my phone went. That's super awkward.
by that logic,
She's a Republican though.
Oh, so they're really.
Really stretching, yeah. There you
She's
go.
a very special-
Progress is progress.
sort of.
All right. Are you ready, Edwin?
Yeah.
Genetically modified organisms raise many concerns in today's society, as there are very few regulations and information that are available. As of right now, although there are a lot of research in regards to GMOs, there is no proper environmental analysis of their effects. For an example, GMOs are harmful to our environment. An example of this is genetic pollution. Cohita, 2013. As environmentalist Jeremy Rifkin stated in his book, The Biotech Century, genetic pollution might occur due to the unintentional process of modernly genetically modified organisms dispersing their genes into the natural environment by breeding with wild plants or animals. The usage of genetic pollution by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations is currently defined as, and I quote, the uncontrolled spread of genetic information into the genomes of organisms in which such genes are not present in nature. For example, the BT corn produces well-born pollen that can spread up to 1 kilometer from farms and have killed the caterpillars of the monarch butterfly. Therefore, I stand resolved that the U.S. federal government should increase restrictions on the development, use, and or sales of genetically modified organisms. Contention 1, harms, significance. USDA placing GMOs varieties in non-regulated status without proper environmental analysis is accelerating mutation, promotes biased inspections, and damages the environment. The precautionary principle is not being applied to the degree that is needed. Alaska in 06. Ecosystems are complex and not every risk associated with the release of new genetically modified organisms have taken into account in risk assessment. Some risks are consequences of rare events or may take many years to emerge. At large scales, there are places on today these conditions are amplified. We must apply the precautionary principle where unnecessary ignorance are factors. This exposes early warning, ensures the real-world conditions are accounted for, takes full account of assumptions, and evaluates the alternative to maximize innovative benefits and maximizes the cost of surprises. 2. GMOs greatly impacts the environment. Kahida 2013. When the genetically modified organisms are allowed to breed with organisms which are not genetically engineered, these organisms will pollute the genetic of non-genetically engineered organisms. Due to this reason, the whole ecological system will be affected. Furthermore, there are chances that these organisms might develop resistance against herbicides and pesticides. Other potential risks considered in the assessment of genetic engineered organisms include any environmental effects on birds, mammals, insects, worms, and other organisms, especially in the case of insects and disease resistance traits. 3. Corn products affect stream organisms and ecosystems. Roshi, Marshall, 2007. A study took place in 2007 about corn genetically produced with BT corn protein planted in the Midwest of the United States near streams. Pollen enters streams and are consumed by water bodies. Feeding trails and lab studies have shown that consumption of BT corn reduces growth and increases mortality of non-target stream insects. Stream insects are important prey of aquatic and reptilian predators. Widespread planting BT corn has unforeseen ecosystem scales consequences. Contention 2, inherency. The USDA's main priority in helping the agriculture industry, where the biotech developers are getting their products released commercially. As of right now, since they gained the non-regulated status, there will be no one to check on them. Regulations conducted by the USDA are not sufficiently protecting against environmental risk. McEwen and Smith, 2008. The U.S. has an elaborate but coordinated regulatory system to evaluate this new crops. Bureaucracy is functional yet imperfect. It is the ability to allow environmental and market release of agricultural products The USDA, through the Office of Biotechnology Services, is primary concern towards protecting the agriculture and the environment from potential pests. The USDA conducted field trials and grants non-regulated status to GE developers who petition for the commercial use. During the process, USDA prepares, files, tests, environmental analysis. Not everyone agrees that the USDA follows its own operating procedures as part of the National Environmental Policy Act. Evidenced by the 3 lawsuits related to the GE deregulation and field trials. The last involved EPA regulates herbicidal and pesticidal properties in GE plants and conducts assessment through the Office of Prevention, Pesticides, and Toxic Substance. Plan. Our plan is for Congress to pass legislation to transfer the authority to evaluate GMOs as pests of agriculture industry, the power to conduct field trials, analyze environmental impact, and the determination of non-regulated status should be under the EPA. Funding should be from the reallocation from the USDA to the EPA. Contention 3, solvency. Our plan will solve the current issue of lack of regulation by putting the EPA in charge of GMO's environmental risk analysis in all capacities of final product. By replacing USDA regulations with EPA authorities, the lack of regulations will be solved. McEwen and Smith 2008. The conflict between USDA and GE product developers that biases involved in the process of declaring a variety non-regulated will be solved by transfer of authority. The EPA will conduct field trials, environmental impact analysis, and determination of non-regulated status as an unbiased entity. By introduces a new agency with a different mission, prioritizing environmental protection, less potentially harmful GMOs will gain non-regulated status.
Process. Okay. Stand up. What did you say? It was the USDA to the EPA? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And when you say, does everyone ask questions or just like? Just you. Just oh, that's okay. Okay. So you're talking about the bias in the environmental studies. What did you mean by that? Where are you going with that?
The information that I presented of research stated that there hasn't been a lot of environmental risk analysis. One of the factors that was one of my research indicated that sometimes there's bias in the inspection process when companies or farmers who do use GMOs are allowed to go through the non-regulated status, and there might be some bias in the process that farmer or company gets their GMOs under the non-regulated status.
Okay. And do you have any specific stream insects that the BT corn killed? Or is it just a general, all of them?
No, I don't have
Okay.
specific insects in detail that the stream has.
Okay. And what is the source for that? Is it? Okay. Okay, and so you said there's no regulations going on now, is what you're saying?
No, the regulation that I mentioned was the risk analysis. There's not enough research done on analyzing the risk potential to the ecosystem, as I presented 3 contentions that has shown that GMOs have greatly impacted our environment.
And what would be enough risk analysis?
Enough to ensure that other organisms surrounding the GMO crops are not going to be affected by the usage of GMOs near the environment that other neighboring ecosystems exist in.
So as long as they're staying within their own bounds, you can do that.
As long as they don't affect the overall ecosystem of every other environment, organism living within that area, then the potential to damage the ecosystem. So
Would you like to use some prep time? Okay. What? Oh, just putting in 30 seconds used. Um, 1 minute used. One 30. So, I'd like to start out by thanking everyone for coming here. And I'd just like to get right into it. So, you brought up that your plan is to move funding from the USDA to the EPA. And from what my research has shown is that there's already certain things in place to whatever it is. Each department has its own purposes and everything like that. The USDA is supposed to ensure that the GMOs are safe to grow. The APHIS is supposed to make sure that it's not a health risk to animals or plants. The EPA is supposed to make sure that it's safe for the environment, and the FDA is supposed to make sure that it's safe for consumption. There's a lot of money being spent on this, and I personally didn't even know that this was going on, so obviously it's not particularly helpful. Because a lot of people are focusing on how much there needs to be more funding, there needs to be more things being done. But apparently there already are things being done, it's just not working. So I propose that instead of continuing with these regulations and everything and making them more severe, that instead we implement labeling of GMOs. And there'd be a huge response to this in the fact that people can now make a decision. Because if you just regulate them in general, then it has a huge effect on food insecurity. There's a high cost of food already for individuals and families across the United States. And the World Food Summit of 1996 defines food security as when all people have, at all times, have access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. And this is, again, already a problem in the United States because of how much things already cost with GMOs in them. And with mandatory GMO labeling, the food prices will still rise because, all these people have to give things straight to the consumer. As Tom, the staff writer from Jones in 2013 said, producers will switch to more expensive non-GMO sources for their products because as labeling becomes mandatory. For food manufacturers to get non-GMO versions of these substances, they have to pay a premium in the market, hence the higher ingredient costs that they would want to pass on to the consumers. If the consumers are habitually paying more for the same product because of the market shift towards non-GMOs, consumers will be unable to maintain the food security that they had in the market before the GMO shift. So again, this reiterates that there will be more food insecurity if we were to do this. Another thing with the GMO labeling, voluntary labeling is still an option, in which case the costs are getting borne by the seller. And they actually did try this in Vermont and New York, where they were to label these. And although this is an issue, it's a bigger issue, it's a smaller issue than if we were trying to regulate them in general, because again, labeling would be better. Touching on more of the malnutrition and food security, 870 million people of the 7.1 billion people in the world, or 1/8, are suffering from chronic undernourishment in 2010 and 2012. The United National Food and Agricultural Organization. Malnutrition is one of the world's greatest problems. Millions of people die each year because they don't have enough food. This problem affects men and women, but it's children who are the most visible victims of malnourishment. 10.9 million children die each year because of poor nutrition. With this malnutrition, one of the things that we have found that has fixed this the most is going out, and these GMOs can give all sorts of, when they're enhanced, they have different attributes that are extremely beneficial for malnutrition, such as calcium increases and these sorts of things that are genetically programmed in that can save thousands of millions of people's lives. So if we were to add regulation to GMOs, then the poor would be the ones that suffer. And if it was labeling costs, or if we label GMOs instead, it will still, yes, raise the price of things more, but it will not be nearly as big of a problem as if we were to regulate them all, and hopefully less people would be dying. And GMO also increases the crop yields, and in this one study done by Brooks PG Economics 2009, the Philippines' average yield increased 24% with insect-resistant corn, and in Romania, the GM soybean averaged a 31% increase in yields. So if we're more efficient with our farming, then again, more people can get food, less people will die. Malnutrition is a problem that's already here, not potential health risks that may or may not arise in the future. So, regulation is, or labeling is the way to go. Okay. That's what the information.
Do you have a second for Aaron?
No.
Okay. The article that you mentioned and malnutrition, though 870 million people, or 1/8. Did anywhere in that whole entire article did you mention that GMOs
We're helping them?
were helping it?
No.
This article was written in 2008. If GMOs are currently being used in the U.S., how come it hasn't helped in decreasing the chronic number of undernourishment that you have stated?
I don't necessarily know that it hasn't. It might very well be a lot worse if GMOs are not in the market right now. That makes sense.
Can you explain how further regulation of GMOs will affect the Philippines and Romania, since this won't affect the U.S.?
If the U.S. is a huge consumer of these things, so if GMOs were to be banned in the United States or regulated more, then these yield increases or these successful tests or everything wouldn't be transferred over. So we wouldn't be getting the benefits of these. That was just an example of saying the benefits of yield increases.
Do you have any data that suggests the export or import of GMOs and how that clearly has benefited the U.S.
I'm sure it's about the economy, but no, not anything example.
Can you further explain how GMOs, not registration GMOs, would, or how would labeling GMOs benefit the malnutrition, chronic malnutrition in the world?
Because of the fact that they might be labeled, but some people don't have an option of choosing a healthier, more organic choice. So again, as long as there's still an option and still available, cheaper, whatnot, then they can still get that and eat.
So you suggest that increasing the price of products will help decrease malnutrition on poor individuals?
No, I'm saying that regulation will increase the price even more than just labeling would, and might not have that even option at all, because the organic ones would still be more expensive in general.
Okay, would you like to use some questions?
Yes.
Okay.